Okay, everyone, I'm just going to do a quick Quiz 7 debrief, and this may be useful for some information for the upcoming exam. So, for question 1, we were talking about the best evidence based intervention strategy that you could utilize to address the following goal on Danny's IEP. So, I'll let you guys read the IEP goal there. But let's talk a little bit about the options. So there's the alert program, zones of regulation, first then board, and then sensory-based strategies. So first then boards are focused primarily on transitions, and then sensory-based strategies can be utilized for a variety of goals, but both of those have mixed evidence. The zones of regulation is practice based on evidence. So there is no evidence out there supporting the use of zones of regulation at this point, although the program was created based on evidence-based theories that they're utilizing in their program. And then that leaves the alert program that has some emerging evidence in support of it. So that would be the best evidence-based intervention strategy. The second question, you are an occupational therapist creating a social skills intervention group for 4 children with autism spectrum disorders. What are the best strategies to incorporate into your group? So we talked about a lot of different strategies to incorporate, and modeling the behavior repeatedly can be useful, but you really want to make sure that you're explaining the steps, you have someone modeling, and then you implement that practice. We specifically talked about how peer models are ideal, and that's where children learn the most from, and that parent or adult models are typically only used if you do not have access to a peer. So that means that the first option, where you explain your steps, allow a peer to model the behavior and practice, is your best strategy. Question 3, you are an occupational therapist helping a child identify strategies to include in their sensory diet. This child is sensory seeking and has difficulty attending to seated activities during class. What is an example of one sensory strategy you may include in his diet to facilitate a calm state prior to class? So the key word here is that we're looking for something that is calming. So there are a few of you that may have said swinging or something along those lines, but there's certain types of swinging that can be arousing and certain types that can be calming. So we really need to specify exactly what kind of strategies we're using. Another thing that I commonly saw in some of the answers were that jumping was included, and jumping can be arousing or calming depending on the child. So that's one that you would really want to test out with the child before recommending on their sensory diet. Another strategy that I saw commonly on there was eating crunchy foods, which actually can be pretty arousing for children. So to talk about some of the strategies that you can use for some calming mechanisms, you can use proprioceptive input such as heavy work, pushing desks or chairs together, carrying books. You can use vestibular input such as linear, consistent direction, swinging, or moving on the ball. And then you can combine some proprioceptive and vestibular input to do things like scooter board racing and things like that to give that deep pressure, but also providing that vestibular input. Okay, so question 4, we have Liliana, a 4th grader in math class. The math teacher asks her to come to the board to complete a problem, and that's when we see that Liliana engages in the behavior. She refuses and throws her books on the floor. So our behavior is refusal and aggression demonstrated by throwing her books. So if we look what happened before that, what could potentially be causing that problem, we see that the math teacher called on her and asked her to come to the board to complete the question. So that's the antecedent, the demand of completing a problem on the board. So if we read a little further, after the behavior occurs, we see that the math teacher tells her to pick up her book, but does not make her complete the question on the board. So she is escaping the demand of completing a problem on the board. For every A I get on my report card, I get a free cookie from Cheryl's Cookies, which, if you weren't aware, that is true to an extent. You can go get up to 3 cookies for 3 different A's on your report card. So I would use that at the end of the semester. When we're talking about what kind of schedule of reinforcement this is a fixed ratio. So it's a reinforcement after a specified number of responses. So the example we used in class was that if I write 3 sentences, I get to pick the game. So in this case, for an A, you go get a cookie. So there's a specified number. A fixed interval would be reinforcement for performing behavior at least once in a specified time period. So that is if you went to class throughout the semester, you could go get a free cookie. So there's kind of that specified time period instead. And the example we used in class was if you do your OT homework and bring it in each week, you can earn a field trip at the end of the month. And no one really picked variable ratio or variable interval, so that was good. Question 6, you are working with a child who is having difficulty responding appropriately to transitions. Which strategy could you use to facilitate successful transitions? So social stories can definitely be used for transitions. First then boards we've talked about a lot. That really helps for children to understand what they're doing now and then what comes next to help ease that transition. Kata training, on the other hand, is focused on balance, coordination, concentration, fitness, and flexibility primarily, so that is not an option. Social stories and first then boards were the correct answers for this question. Okay, so now for question 7, this was a bonus question. We worked on some goal writing. So I just put this here for you for a reminder of what the case study was. And I just want to point out the date of birth is January 30th, 2013. So this kiddo would be about 4 years old. So when we're working on goal writing, and this is kind of what I was grading on, was that you include the behavior you're addressing and that it's clear what you're addressing. I wanted to throw in a couple examples as well. So for goals addressing attention, it's important to include the time you want them to attend the task, and what kind of task it is also helpful. So if it's a fine motor task, a handwriting task, I saw some people do snack time, things like that are good to include. For goals requiring some kind of grasp, so if you're working on handwriting, there were a few people that did some buttoning, utilizing pincher grasps, you want to make sure you're specifying that specific grasp that you're working on for that activity. You'll also want to include the level of assistance. So do you want them to achieve this independently? Are you allowing verbal cues, visual cues? Are you providing modifications such as sensory breaks to improve attention, or a button hook for improvement in independence and ADLs? Any of that information you would want to include in the goal. And then also you would want to include a date or time frame in which you hope to meet the goal. And I also recommend that you consider including trials to ensure success over time. So it can be helpful to include that the child can do something 3 out of 4 trials, so that you're making sure that they didn't get it just once out of a fluke and that they can continue to succeed in that goal. So kind of just to review, this is what I was grading on, not necessarily the accuracy of the goal or the time that you included. Here are some examples, and I will say, we still, all goals are still a work in progress for everyone, I think, even for practicing clinicians. But these were some good goals that I thought and I really liked. So you can kind of review these here, and we'll go through the first couple. Neil will demonstrate increased attention by remaining on the carpet during circle time for 5 minutes on 4 out of 5 occasions by 3/15/2017. So this one's really descriptive. You understand exactly where they're supposed to be, how long, and I also wanted to note that that was a very good amount of time for a 4-year-old. We had some people that had some really lofty goals as far as how long we think a 4-year-old could attend. So it's really important to think about those client factors and where they should be developmentally as well when you're writing these goals. Maybe the only thing that I would add here would be the level of assistance needed. So are they doing this independently? Do they need some verbal cues? Are you providing sensory breaks or some kind of modification beforehand? And then the second goal, Neil will independently button 3 buttons with a fine pincer grasp on 3 out of 4 trials. I thought this was great because we saw the level of assistance needed, which was none. We wanted him to accomplish it independently. The specific number of buttons, there was trials so that you can make sure that they, were able to maintain that success, and it specified what type of pincher grasp, which was great. I think the only thing that I would add here was making sure that we have a timeline so that we know when we want to achieve this goal by. And I'll let you kind of review the other goals and think about things that you maybe would add based on the information that we just discussed. Okay, so the last question was an MBCOT prep question. So this one was pretty tricky. Impulse control difficulties limit a 12-year-old boy with conduct disorder in the classroom, which is the most effectively written functional goal for his IEP. So the key word here is functional. So the correct answer is A. By the end of the period, student will participate in classroom activities for 1 hour without disruptive outbursts for 4 out of 5 days. And that's because this is relating the performance to be developed to a child's environment or life tasks, and that's what makes it meaningful and functional. So those functional goals really target successful participation. B and C are measurable, so as you'll notice, it has specific times or a certain amount of time that you need to accomplish it by, but they're less functional and they're not addressing the context in which the skills are applied. So that's kind of the overview from the Quiz 7 on sensory processing. And autism. If you have any questions, please email me. I will be around to answer any emails late tomorrow night or early Thursday morning before your exam.